I've made it clear on the worst list that 2025 was a year I disliked. It's not a good start to the Create Music Group era, and if they keep adding songs like Going Threats, things will get worse. I've also mentioned that the best of this year has been the weakest I've covered, and I wanted to explain why, because it's not really an issue with quality. There's actually a lot of good material to come out this year, particularly with Instinct, as the sub-label is in a much better position where there's variety and isn't just relying on house songs. And even if there are house songs, most of them had a personality, or at least something interesting beyond the house beat and bass line. And while I have my gripes with both Silk and Uncaged, they managed to crank out some great stuff every once in a while. For Silk, a lot of the songs sounded very samey and they blended in together, but it's not like any of the songs were bad, more just a repetitive sound that's considerably overplayed and thus much harder to find highlights compared to other years. But with artists like AMR, Cloud Cage, Doko, and Oracle, there were still good tracks. And for Uncaged, while the Britnum influx isn't going away, there were also plenty of acts like Chime, Paper Skies, and Affinity to provide us with some great material. And if nothing else, Virtual Ride is at least making decent dubstep material, along with Lizdek and Viperactive for trap. But while there was quality to be had here, the connection to each track compared to others was much weaker. If these songs were in other years, most of them would not be able to crack the top 10 of 2024 or 2023. And that's what really bugs me this year, because say what you want about 2024, the high points were really good that year, and they were able to counterbalance the low points. But here, yeah, that just wasn't the case. As a result, it tainted the year for me. But with that said, onto the list. No remixes or VIPs, sequel songs can count, but that's about it. And a minimum of 2 songs per artist in the top 10. And with that said, let's begin with our honorable mentions. If there's an artist in 2025 that surprised me the most, it's Higo. For what seemed like one of those average house artists that I would probably forget, he actually turned out to be a competent UK garage artist with a knack for groove and energy, fusing Calvin Harris's 2018 era and combining it with Tony Romero's 2021 into tracks that you can jam to. Case in point, Funk Machine. An absolute jam of a tune with engaging sound design, the flares of bass, the funk elements, the tight percussion. It all feels fresh despite similar sounds getting on the label. And the halftime segments are just as effective. In fact, I got so lost in the groove of the song that I forgot that the song went halftime at all. It's like the song says, if it's funk that you want, then it's funk that you'll get. I mean, took you long enough. Ever since Silk merged with Monstercat, I was hoping for crossover potential between Silk artists getting on Instinct and Uncaged. But outside of Cascade, there wasn't a crossover for Silk artists hopping onto other sub-labels, until this year, with one half of the Eminence duo, Zenze, finally crossing over to Instinct. He's become the Cloud None of Silk, with him releasing more down-tempo lo-fi stuff and having a huge year in 2023, with his album Destination Heartbreak. Just like with Cloud None, he expanded his style into house and garage, with cuts like Oasis, Fix Your Heart, Who Are We, and Magic being some of my favorites from him. And that style is present with his song Colors, with some of that lo-fi texture in the lead and bass in the drops, and it creates for a melancholic experience. Reminds me of Casbo's Learning of Urgency, and the garage switch up works just as well. The only reason it's not in the top 10 is because I have heard the better version of this song, and that's Zenze's remix of The Long Way Home by the Midnight Kids, which takes this exact same style and is more effective in basking in that melancholic vibe. But still, if you haven't listened to this track yet, check it out. I want more Zenze on Instinct. People might be shocked that this isn't on the list proper. While I do like this single, for Trivecta standards, it's not his best. Especially when he has something else later that's more that I want to hear from him. But that still doesn't mean Arise isn't a great track, because it is. The psytrance drop from Blastoise is phenomenal, with laser effects and vocal chops adding depth to the drop, and A-Media's vocal delivery does a great job at creating the epic atmosphere the song is trying to go for. I feel like if this was someone's first introduction to psytrance, it would be a great one. But the highlight is Trivecta's melodic dubstep drop. He said before during the I'm Peaking podcast that he feels like melodic dubstep has become rather stale. He's been trying to add something fresh to the genre, which is why I respect him so much. And here, he He's decided to combine his sound with a G-Funk sound, and it works surprisingly well here. Between this and his remix of Nothing at All with Kill the Noise, I actually wouldn't mind if Tribeca makes more drops like that. This isn't as good as Ghost Machine, Into the Limelight, or Riptide, but it's still a great track all around. So after having a great 2024 with I Contain Flashing Images, Nomada decided this year to make massive changes to his style by incorporating faster tempos. This led to him making genres like trance, hard techno, hardstyle, and in this case, breakcore. And while I have mixed thoughts on his newer style of his, most of it is because of the Surge remix and Remember There's Always a Tomorrow, the latter of which felt like being experimental for the sake of it. Forget About Us, as well as the rest of the Odyssey Sound System EP, was great. Although he's not the only one on this song, we finally have new 4 on this list after missing the list last year just by a hair. This was the idea that I was looking forward to the most off of his Odyssey mix. The darker mechanical drums and distorted glitches work wonders in creating the moody, almost dystopian atmosphere. It also provides good contrast for the brighter chiptune leads, piano leads, and a great vocal performance from Lava Hong that provides emotional core. Like so much of his work before, Nomana is able to combine so many leads and pads to keep things interesting yet cohesive at the same time. But it's not my favorite song of his this year. As a whole, that probably goes to Drunken Julians. On the label, well, we'll get to it. Now on the other hand, just because something isn't creative, that doesn't mean the song is bad. Case in point, Punctual. And after Heaven Knows with Cascade, it seems like they're finally making songs more towards their Maze EP, and less of the monotonous spoken word tech house cuts like Repeating Perfect. The more the duo leads into progressive house, the better the song will be. And while this is nowhere near the same level as Heaven Knows, Eden is still a solid track in the right direction. Because of Punctual's production quality, the lush synth pads bounce nicely off of the tighter percussion and horn accents, creating a drop with lots of groove as well as an adventurous ambience. And Hannah Bolian has the power needed with her vocals to sell the ambience. It honestly feels like an arc regarding my thoughts on this duo, and it ended up working well for them in the end. Great stuff. Because while I have mixed thoughts on Kodeko's shift from melodic bass to melodic house, I See is a fantastic track throughout. A trance cut with sharp synth design, beautiful piano keys, and a high-pitched vocal sample that works way better than you would expect it to. The stormy environment surrounding the track also elevates the adventurous aesthetic that Kodeko is known for. Even if I found his EP last year to be okay, I like how the mysterious mood and sharper sound design is still present in his house songs, just like it was in his melodic bass ones. And the double single of I See and the underrated Take Me Away is even better. I really hope Kodeko sticks around and makes more of this. Again, great stuff. So this year, Bad Computer released 4 singles, and honestly, given the nature of this year, all 4 of them had a shot on making the list. Connected is a jam, combining elements of deep house and electro house, with a rap performance from Gold that's way better than I expected it to be. When You're Not Around with Roy Knox was another one, although a big issue for me is that it feels less like a proper collaboration with Roy Knox and more that he assisted Bad Computer on production. But out of the 4, 2 of them made the list, with this being the first. Like with Punctual, it's not the most creative song from Bad Computer, but with the crispy clap, the sharper distorted bass line, and the cute chiptune lead, there's a lot to like with this production. And even despite all the simple elements to the song, the elements are so good that it never gets tiring for me. There's also the carefree attitude to this track that you don't hear in Bad Computer tracks, which also helps keep the song fresh and stand out from the rest of his tracks. It's not as good as 4D, I doubt it would be as good as So Lost either, but when the song puts you in the mood as much as this did, it's making the list. Say what you mean. Oh yeah, This is the other reason why When You're Not Around is missing the list, because Roy Knox released this near the beginning of the year, a wild collaboration between Sad Boys and Francis Durrell's drum and bass alias After Heaven, with Sad Boys handling the verse production with Noah Coane's pop rock vocals. Roy Knox handles the melodic dubstep drop that has a lot of punch as per usual with him. After Ghost in the Shadows, I've been keeping more of an eye on this guy, and I'm so glad I did, because between this and Need You Again on NCS, another collaboration with Sad Boys, Roy Knox is an artist I want to stick around more. Whereas Sad Boys, I've always been mixed on, but if they keep making singles like this single, Hello I Miss You, and Need You Again, they might win me over next year. And for the final section, we have Francis Durrell's drum and bass section with Sad Boys. It sounds really crisp and emotional, with a wiry lead cascading well into the vocal chops, and we end things off with a Mazar-esque halftime section that's just as good as when Mazar does it. The fact that these three artists were able to combine their styles together in a cohesive way is an accomplishment all on its own, and gives us Francis Durrell's best songs and shapes. This was so close to making the list proper, but it just fell short because I think the lower half of the 10 edged this out. Speaking of which, on to the top 10, starting with number 10. The most shocking coincidence is that both the 10th best and the 10th worst feels like two sides of the same coin. Where Wonky was a track that most people hated, but I can never see myself hating it as much as so many others did, whereas this song seems to be beloved by the majority of the people, yet for me, it's only number 10, the same placement this artist got last year. And while I don't adore this as much as others do, I do like it enough that it is making my list. It's funny how back-to-back years, Haywire got the exact same spot as last time. Despite me not loving chromatically, I did acknowledge that it was still a good song with a lot of colorful design. And a lot of my thoughts on the last song translates here. Haywire, despite not always making amazing tracks like White Lie, has been consistently great since his return. His ability to grab an interesting hook or melody line, it's still there, and it's just as good as before. And I'm glad that Bracken is back, not just for nostalgia points, but because he really needed another single since Wherever I Go back in 2019 was the last song he made, and that song was bad. And the song itself, it's good too. With Haywire's melody lines playing off the bouncy bass line and type percussion tap, the build-up is great too with that iconic melody line and Daft Punk vocals, so why isn't it higher? Well, maybe it's just me, but I wasn't wowed with the drops as everyone else was. It got some good lush floaty sound design in there, but the lead melody doesn't have the same impact as the rest of the track. It sounds the least developed out of everything here. That's not to say the drops aren't good. There's still plenty of bounce and energy to them, and when Haywire's lead comes back, it sounds great. And while it's not higher on this list, I can absolutely see why people would put this higher. Regardless, check it out if you haven't already. Number 9. I honestly contemplated whether or not I should leave the song off the list. I know it's not the most boundary-pushing song in the genre, and I know there's plenty of other songs like Enemies by UC, 0200 by Abstract, and even Funk Machine by Higo that people would pick over this. At the same time, there's something so unapologetically happy and groovy about the song that it's slowly crept up the list. And sometimes, when it's deserved, you have to let the song, well... If there's any sign that Monstercat should take note of, it's the fact we need more Higo and Instinct. And while the community prefers Funk Machine because it has more interesting sound design, there's something about this track that makes it stick out more. If Punctual was proof that you can make a good song that's not boundary pushing, Higo's shine absolutely elevates that argument. The jaunty pianos, the solid bass line that has enough room to express itself, the cute vocal sample, it's super bright, it's catchy in a good way, and it's perfect for the summer months. And that's the part where Funk Machine, despite the song being great, could never accomplish. Meshing the funk wave appeal of Calvin Harris's late 2010's work into something that, while it isn't unique, it's super memorable. Please let this guy become a mainstay. Number 8. A popular artist that returned to the label was Dioro, an artist that was popular for the song 5 Hours and the vocal edit with Chris Brown, 5 More Hours. And believe me, making a likable Chris Brown song, that was enough for me to like this guy. He showed up on this label before in 2018 with The Craze with Dirty Audio, which wasn't all that good, but the Moments section definitely saved that song from being worse. And several years later, he finally returned to the label with To the Floor with Riot 10 and J. Cruz, which is mostly a mid-tier Dioro song with flat rhythm drops. Thanks, Riot 10. The one moment where he could have brought his 5 More Hours style back, he didn't. But that doesn't mean the style wasn't present, because lo and behold, someone else decided to do it themselves. If you had told me that Kid would be an artist I would be looking for about 2 years ago, I would have called you crazy. Granted, that was due to my limited knowledge about the guy from a Keizo and Steve Aoki collab respectively. I thought this guy was a side trance hardstyle act in the lane of Timmy Trumpet, but to my amazement, with Endless in Between last year, I found out he was instead a multi-genre artist with a surprisingly great stutter style and a knack for great melodies, even if the mixing wasn't always the best. Which leads us into his single, Afterlife. Production doesn't have the huge sound that's common with festival progressive house cuts, but with the starting vocal chop, the buzzy synth that's restrained but has enough presence to create some body, the old school feeling to the track, it doesn't need to be. And it's old school in the best way, where it sounds like an older dance hit but has a modern blending so it doesn't feel dated. It's why I pointed out the 5 Hours comparison. It's not trying to be emotional and grand. All it does is make you want to dance, and it absolutely succeeds in doing that. Between this and his collab with Chill that just missed the list, yeah, I think I owe this guy an apology. I did not know your game, and now that I do, I can't wait to see what you do next. Number 7. But if you thought Kid made the best of Stutter House, another artist came and made something even better. Ever since his last single on the label, Ghost in the Machine from 2021, Trivecta's been on quite the journey, changing his style to more folk-inspired tracks with his album Find My Way, and getting some frequent collabs with big names like Kill the Noise and Seven Lions. It's interesting to see his style change over the years, from his early Monstercat days to his Ophelia pivot to his recent style. And Before I Go feels like the epitome of his folk style. A song that's only real problem is that it's too short. But between Van Roo's vocals reminding me of Grabbits, the acoustic guitar, the airy aesthetic of the whole track, the bunt influence drop where Trivecta adds his elements to make it his own, it's all just gorgeous to listen to, proving that Trivecta has the ability to make effective house songs as well as dubstep ones. If this was longer, this would have had a higher shot on the list, as the folk elements are incredible and it feels like you're in the environment of the song. Now, compared to something like Ghost in the Machine or Into the Limelight, this is weaker, but this track can absolutely stand on its own. Great song. Hopefully this is not the last we'll see of Trivecta. Number 6. One of the strangest occurrences this year was when months swapped in terms of good and bad songs. For example, typically July is where most of the best stuff occurs, and yet this year, July was one of the worst in terms of quality. And not just because of DJ Diesel. There's a lot of bad material from Valentino Khan's Elevator, to Bayar's Crash Out, to Whipped Cream's Collide, where somehow Afterglow with Timmy Trumpet, despite being above average, that's actually one of the better cuts that month. And on the flip side, you have a month like August, which has been awful for the past 2 years, but this year, August was one of the better months. Where even despite acts like Eater and Company, there was a lot to enjoy about that month. But there's one month in particular that was almost shocking. January. For a month that was consistently good for a few years, all of a sudden became an avalanche for horrible boredom. There were a few standouts from that month though. The 3 songs were Beacon by Cloud None, Rubik's Cube by Rusko, oh yeah, and this. Because while Breathe is a carefree back computer track, Connected was a jam, and When You're Not Around with Roy Knox was a good track, Undefined feels like another beast entirely. A combination of electro house and techno with some haunting vocal samples and impactful percussion. The emptiness of the techno production only adds to this eerie nature of the track, especially with the vocal samples getting more croaky and filling the headphones or speakers with sound. It sounds like something out of a horror movie. which is one of the last things you expect from a bad computer track. The guy who made 4D, Just Dance, and New Dawn. Even some of his distorted tracks like Calling Us and Destroy Me didn't sound like this. And the drops that involve Bad Computer's usual lead, it's distorted and sputtered out, creating a bombastic nature that helps carry the creepy atmosphere. I have to wonder at some point what crazy sound design idea Bad Computer will come up with, if this is what he's willing to make. Again, all 4 Bad Computer singles had a shot on this list. I thought When You're Not Around would be the best one during the middle of October, then I re-listened to this and said, nope, every other single doesn't even compare to this. An undefined track that clearly shows the fear of the unknown. Number 5. Do any of you remember Oblivion? She debuted on the label in 2021 with her EP Dream Theory, where it got a ton of praise from the community. And I'd argue on instinct, Oblivion was a bright spot in a year that was incredibly frustrating, disappointing, and underwhelming as a whole. So you'd think she would get more singles, especially when her style is similar to Haywire, but after her EP dropped, she just dipped from the label, eventually getting songs from NCS and a self-promoted label titled To Seeking Blue Records. Well, after 4 years, she's back, and while it's not as good as her stuff from 2021, it's definitely one of the records to focus on in terms of the best. Or in this case... You know, given Oblivion gets a lot of comparisons to Haywire, it's wild to see her higher on the list than Haywire. But in this case, it feels deserved. Hyperfocus was a track that, according to Oblivion herself, was written in a hyperfocus session, where everything else fades away and all you can focus on is the work, or in this case, the music. And man, she really captured that feeling, because I'm listening to this song and it certainly puts me in that tunnel vision trance for the next 3 minutes and 18 seconds. With this dreamy haze, the gentle plucky lead already putting me in the relaxing mood, and the drops match with the relaxing nature of the track, with a bubbly synth design and liquid snap. It's almost like a fusion of lo-fi and future bass, a combination I didn't know I wanted, but now I do. And to top it all off with a Shark's X drop, the alternating piano keys, and a slowed down section at the very end. And you have yourself a great track for Instinct, and a track I want to hear more of. It also came around the time when my MFA program was starting up, so I listened to this a lot on the late nights, and it's by far the best song in a week with Ritual by Eater and a Bad Company EP. So please, Monstercat, keep sending more of Oblivion and this. Number 4. One of my many problems with No Mana's new pivot into faster tempos is that it resulted in songs that were just experimental for the sake of doing it. Overall, it led to a weaker year for him than in 2024. It also resulted in his worst song on the label, that being his remix of Keizo's Surge, because it incorporates the worst of his old and new style. The monotone club banger style and the voyeuristic just to do it style. Now that's not to say that all of his material was bad. Odyssey's Sound System was still a great EP. When we announced his newer style, I'm glad he started with this before giving us the more experimental cuts. If Oblivion made me hyper-focus, this on the other hand, well... No Mana is at his best when he creates tracks that are melodically expressive, whether that be the vocals or the synth melody. And while Yesterday and Strangers are the best examples when it comes to his catalog, and Aesthetic and Irresponsible is a close second, in terms of this year, Losing Focus is the clear best from No Mana, at least on the label. The pitched up vocal performance from Bertie Scott, the build up with the wavy synth pads and chiptune axis reminded me a lot of Strangers. It already sounds great with a melodic composition, which leads into the drop, with that guitar lead creating that 2000s trance appeal that No Man is clearly trying to go for here, along with the No Mana's chiptune lead towards the second half creating the variety that he's best known for. It's a nostalgic trance cut that's not filled to the brim with sound, but it creates the groove and still makes you want to dance. I consider this the best song off of Odyssey's Sound System EP because while the rest of the tracks took much bigger risks and definitely caters to the hardcore EDM demographic, I thought for the longest time that Forget About Us would be above this at some point, but despite being more emotionally hitting, Losing Focus has the charm that song doesn't have, and the idea feels more complete here. It contains both the new and old style that I preferred back during I Contain Flashing Images. If No Man wants to do more songs out of this house tempo, I want to hear more trance cuts like this. Number 3. Oh, Chime, what will we ever do without you? You didn't think I'd forget to add Chime here, did you? I mean, I did last year with Pyro Classic, but that was more because Skybreak had Euphoria Rush and Out of Frame. And since Skybreak was absent, Chime cruised his way near the top with Scary Pretty Paradox, the best song off of Chime's Between EP, although the self-titled track and Rainbow Rape Parade VIP were also great as well. But this immediately stood out to me when I heard this leak during Chime's ID showcase in 2024. And hearing the drops, it's not hard to understand why. The lush synth stabs, the explosive nature of the track, the great rhythm, and to top it off, it's a combination between melodic dubstep, color bass, and Tear Out. Combining them all, and it still manages to not only be cohesive, but also add some layers to the track itself. The Tear Out sections in particular caught my interest. Since Chime was able to do this with his remix of End of Us, it works wonders there, and I argue it works better here. The interplay between the melodic to heavy elements is great, and there's a great quiet vocal performance from 7KY to top it all off. I've stated before when covering the other side how Chime is able to create a world within his tracks that feels real, and this is no exception here. Not even Wheatley from Portal 2 can escape this paradox. Number 2. Out of all the songs, this, along with the rest of the top 10, were the only songs that really resonate with me throughout the whole year. Walking away from 2024 and even 2023 with so much great material left this year feeling dry in comparison. You don't know what you've got until it's gone. But at the same time, there's still great material, just none that really connected with me, except for these last two. Yeah, it's probably not a surprising pick for this list, given the return of this beloved artist. At the same time, I feel like he's one of the few that would have made a song like this. Welcome back, Rogue. One of the biggest highlights of the year is hearing the song get leaked in June on Call of the Wild and waiting for it to get an official release. One of the more beloved acts on the label making a return after Emeralds 3 years ago, it was a pretty big deal, and indeed, if it wasn't for returning acts like this year would be way worse for it. Rogue had his various explorations of genres from trap to kitchen step to synth pop and future bass. And while this isn't beating out Empires, for me this is a solid top 5 for Rogue songs. The drops in particular are a great highlight, showcasing his style of future bass from 2019 wonderfully, with the sharper airy synth stabs bouncing well with that trap beat. The bass guitar breaks sound great building up to the synths while still maintaining the flow, and the 4 on the floor beat was a nice addition. It makes for a pleasant experience, but the element that makes this song is the content. All about making things work out even when you're not at that perfect moment. In this case of Rogue, it was for his wife. But there's something about the greater message and the way Rogue delivers it in the verses that make it stick out for me personally. Rogue might have intended this to be about his wife, but by the time I listened to the leaked song back in June, I had just wrapped up my graduation trip. Moving on, graduating with a bachelor's degree and moving on to a master's. And while looking back at some of the photos during the trip while listening to this early preview in June, I could see a lot of the lyrics resonating with me. That might not be where I want to be with my career, but there's gold under the surface. It's not the most complex writing, but given how good the song's production is, the timing I listened to the song, along with Rogue's performance, looks like Rogue has more on the way, and I'm looking forward to every moment of it. But before we get to number 1, let's talk about Silk. Last year, I came up with a list of Silk songs that I enjoy, but I never gave a real reason behind them. The main reason I did this was because despite Silk having an unfair advantage compared to Uncaged or Instinct in terms of high and low points, I wanted to give the sublabel some much needed attention. Except, as I've already said before, it was very hard to find highlights for the label this year. But with enough digging, I eventually found some. So I created a list of the best Silk songs that you should check out this year, if nothing else. So let's start off the list in chronological order, starting with And I don't know the way home. They was always say so, but I need your hand. People might be shocked that this is so low, given how high Oracle got last year with Around Me. But just like with Colors, there is a better version of the song called Strangers with Holochrome, but that doesn't mean this song isn't still great. Oracle is the king of vocal-driven chill house tracks, and this is a good showcase of why, with the lush synth pads, the gentle piano keys providing the nighttime aesthetic, meshing well with All Night's vocal performance. If you want to get into Silk and don't know where to start, this song and this artist are great choices. Oh look, something that's not house, and it's made by one of my favorite Silk artists, Liam Thomas, who won me over 3 years ago with Aurora, a liquid dubstep cut with sidechain ambient synths, a smooth radar-esque lead, and an incredible ability to make you relax. It's also the best song off of the Silk Selections '04 compilation. Liam Thomas has always had a knack for ambience in his music, whether it was from his Aurora EP or Purple with AK, and this is yet another single that proves it. Check it out.
Say what you wanna say before I let go. All of my memories fade like an echo.
Arshan, I feel, represents Silk in 2025. Songs that are fine for what they do, but they often blend together stylistically to the point where you're hoping for something else. Anything else. But to be fair, there were a few songs off of Arshan's Hearts Divided that had a shot here. Sentient with All Night, Cycles with Lewin, and November, but I decided to go with this because it has the best vocal performance from Danakam, and Arshan gets more ambitious with his style, combining buzzing synths, fluttering accents into a climax that's very satisfying to hear. If there's any song to check out from the album, it's this one. I find it disappointing that this didn't make it into the best of 2025 compilation, even despite the hashtag CloudCage sweep. I would put CloudCage above a lot of similar artists within the genre because of how he blends the sounds to create a smooth and pleasant experience. And Speak About It, it's no exception here. I like the vocals used here. The production sounds more wiry and has more personality than most of this year. There's a delayed knock on the beat that also keeps the song interesting, where despite a 3-minute and 34-second runtime, it's evenly paced to make sure that you don't feel a second go by. Great song. I always had a stylistic preference when it comes to Shingo Nakamura. The more he leans into trance elements, the better the song is. Which is why I prefer this single over Worlds Apart, because the bright piano lines, the pulsating bass line, and tropical synths work wonders with creating the grand aura that Shingo is best known for with his album Glow. This guy's catalog is huge. He's one of the most respected out of the Silk artists, and this song is just another reason why. It was a toss-up between this and Sonera, and while Sonera borderline sounds like a cut from Nigel Good, One Night in Medellin has a better atmosphere. The tropical undertones, the nicely placed reverb, the watery string accents towards the second half, it all creates for an incredibly satisfying listen. One of the few cases where a B cut is better than the A cut, and it's not the only case of that because... This is a case where the texture and sound design can amplify what should be just another melodic house song into a complete masterpiece. Although Afterlife with Holochrome was also a contender for this section as well. Bassline and lead combination is easily one of the best of the whole year, to the point where it creates a whole world using only a few elements. And the lead change towards the second half of the drop elevates this to a whole nother level. This was my first introduction to Banyan, and it's a great first impression. I want these guys to stick around more. For For this last song, we have a collaboration between the best organic house producer on the label and an artist that should have been a mainstay after the Moonstone EP in 2023. A song so good despite AMR having Numb and Amberlight Sunfalls as contenders, this beat out all of them. It's quite amazing how his style blends together with Ether's. AMR handling the pianos, percussion tap, and violins, while Ether handling the twinkling synth elements, vocal sample, and echoing flutes. And Ether brings something distinctive to the track to make it stand out from the rest of the house songs on Silk. He has several collaborations with Direct and Cloud None, where he pulls off a melancholic nighttime mood incredibly well, and here it's just as effective. I really hope AMR makes more stuff like this, and I hope we get to see more of Ether next year. But with the Silk cuts wrapped up, now on to number 1. You may have noticed that unlike last year, I didn't point out my number 1 choice for the year if I included Silk on this list. There's a reason for that. Most of my picks were still melodic house, and none of it really had the magic that made 2023 such a fantastic year for the sublabel. I really struggled to find the best song for that sublabel, something that wasn't much of a challenge in previous years. And it wasn't because of strong competition, in fact it was the complete opposite. And it wasn't exclusive to Silk either. Uncaged seriously tanked again, and despite Instinct having a lot of decent material, it didn't have the same emotional core that made the label at its best. Perfect was the only exception, along with this. See, originally Perfect was going to take this slot back in November to early December, but like with the best list of 2023, after listening to this again during the best of compilation, I feel like this earns the position. Some might call this cheating, but given the fact that this was connected to a double release of an Instinct song, plus this artist has been on my list before, I feel like it's an exception that I will take given this year. And hey, if you want to make the case that people should check out Silk more often, well, they have to start somewhere.
I've been looking through these pages, trying to wrap my head around why the story's reading backwards without feeling overwhelmed.
On paper, Imprint feels like it has everything stacked against it. It's another melodic house song with the same aesthetic as so many songs from that sublabel this year, and it's from an otherwise underwhelming project, Undo, which saw Cascade either repeating tired formulas of house songs like with Dancer, or ambient and experimental tracks such as Like That turning out bad. But when I listened to this song during the best of compilation, the elements that were fantastic started clicking for me more and more. And that's when I realized, Imprint feels like the magnum opus of Undo as a whole, with the lyrical content about a complicated relationship from someone or something about trying to get to what the person is actually thinking and feeling. They're trying to read them and their thoughts. Cascade has said in interviews regarding this project that he had a hard time getting back and making music. He was making it, but he wasn't getting anywhere, and he left unsatisfied feeling like his music wasn't honest. And from that story alone, the parallels between the lyrical content reveal itself. It's not that far of a stretch to assume the lyrical content is referring to himself and his mind. The dry ink doesn't set in stone what he thinks, clearly. And then there's the song and execution. Remember how I said on paper this was just another melodic house song? Yeah, that was underhanded on purpose. Sure, the percussion tap and muted piano keys, they aren't super different from most Silk tracks, but Cascade manages to add some great synth work distinctive to him that elevates this track. The low deep house bass, the analog synths, the ghostly guitar accents, the violin work, all this creates an environment that feels, once again, real and lived in. It's suffocating, but it's in the best way possible, where just like with Oblivion with Hyperfocus, you get lost in the song. That also includes Courtney Storm, who not only sounds gorgeous here, the reverb on her vocals activates at the best time to help with the atmosphere. And during a time I re-listened to this during the compilation albums was also a time when I finished my first semester of my MFA program, giving me the same connection as Perfect by Rogue. If you want a great start to get into Silk properly, especially this year, Imprint, Cascade and Courtney Storm, the best Monstercat song of 2025. And unlike previous years, that also includes Silk. Who knows what 2026 will have in store for us, hopefully a comeback or at the very least a better year, and with songs like this, they'll definitely get there. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, it really helps. I plan on continuing my throwback series sometime in 2026, so stay tuned for that. But until then, I will see you all soon.